So whilst I most likely am not going to be going for Shenhe's constellations or weapon myself, and I feel pretty happy with C0 and Favonius Lance, I still wanted to make this short video because I feel it's very helpful to share this knowledge. For those of you thinking about going for Shenhe's constellations, you might see in various online sources that C1 is only a small increase and C2 is a lot better. Whilst this may be true according to the assumptions laid out in whatever calc you're reading, it doesn't really tell the full story. This is typically because DPS calcs can only factor in sustained rotations, they're very limited. And also they cannot factor in front-loaded damage, front-loaded energy and overall flexibility. Similarly, calcs looking at a C2 can show it in a very advantageous light because they are using sustained rotations, and they don't really account for it doing very little for your team's burst damage window. In reality, there is a reason why many speedrunners value Shenhe C1 so highly. For example, in Ayaka Free's team with Mistsplitter, Shenhe, Kokomi and Kazuha, a lot of players may actually choose to target Shenhe C1 first. You see, if you have an endgame account, it's likely most enemies and the bulk of Abyss Chambers are mostly cleared in one rotation. In particular, Ayaka's burst window is doing the bulk of your team's damage. In these fights, Shenhe getting an extra skill use with her C1 provides significant front-loaded damage increase through her quills, as well as a very sizable increase in team energy generation. This can be the difference between, say, Ayaka having no energy for the next chamber versus a completely smooth gameplay experience. I don't have C1 myself, but you can see here an example of how significant Shenhe's skill is for team energy generation. But if enemies are dying during Ayaka's burst window, it's kind of before C2's burst extension even matters much, and at that point you're only really getting the 15% cryo crit damage. Lastly, for the ballers out there, Shenhe's C6 also enables a lot of flexibility. Whether you team her up with Ganyu or Ayaka, especially if you also have them at C6, it can allow you to dispatch off one set of enemies with normal attacks and charge attacks, and other enemies with normal burst setups, or vice versa. But again, because calcs follow strict rotations, it's very difficult for them to account for this flexibility properly. On a similar topic in regards to weapons, Calamity Queller's calcs are often scuffed since most people generally do not compare team damage, and it's a lot more easy to just look at personal damage or Shenhe's personal buff increases. Now, whilst her signature is still a good weapon, especially at C1, Shenhe is primarily a support, so you can't just look at her in a vacuum. Comparisons are unlikely to account for a weapon like Favonius Lance reducing team energy recharge requirements and therefore allowing both more offensive substats in your team as well as overall smooth rotations. I hope you found this video helpful. This isn't about bashing anyone's calcs, it's more about me trying to explain yet another situation where calcs can't really tell the full story.